All right, folks, we got a few more people that are going to come in and settle down, and we'll go ahead and sort of start with our welcome and introduction here. I made an announcement sort of informally about 6 or 7 minutes ago that Yerba Mate is the sponsor for this session. If you guys haven't had a chance to visit the Blue Yeti, feel free to do that now or on the way out. Yerba Mate is an organic and regenerative high energy drink that is doing a lot of good things for the planet, very like-minded. We were lucky enough last jam session to have a representative here to answer questions, and they had someone call out, as all of us who run or work in a business can understand that they weren't here to answer questions tonight, but we're very honored to be in partnership with them for this session. I do see a couple of familiar faces, some folks that may have been here last time, but for all of our new faces, welcome to Juneberry. Thanks for coming early on a day when it's threatening to wet us once again. And we're here to talk about real issues and have a conversation about local food and farming and things that we can all do better in this movement. And so last time we had Mr. Daniel Griffith here. For those of you who were here, you know. For those of you who weren't, he runs the Savory Institute Hub. And he was talking to us about soil health is not the only thing that matters. So much of the regenerative industry is all about soil health, but there's so many other variables that go into being able to farm holistically and regenerate land and communities and economies. And he spoke a lot about quality of life for those farmers who are doing the hard work trying to regenerate land. And his take-home message, his call to action for us was to look at your own 2 feet, find the closest farmer to you and ask them what you can do to help. And it might not always be that they need you to buy their product. Maybe they need help clearing some fence line or. And so if you weren't here, you missed a good session. If you were here, that's just a quick recap of what we talked about. And today we're talking about feeding local, and Miss Carla and myself are going to just have a casual conversation up here about what some of that means to us. We have a couple of points that we're hoping to cover. This is about a 45-minute session. I'll have to leave promptly at 6. Miss Carla, I hope you'll hang around to answer questions a few minutes. If we can make time at the end, we'll entertain questions towards the end. But if we could just get through some of our points, I hope this will be inspiring for some of us. So I am super excited to introduce Miss Carla St. Germain to you all. I met Miss Carla 3 springs ago at Juneberry's very first plant sale. Her and her husband, Mr. Tim, came down to shop at our plant sale, to vet our company to see if they can bring some of their clients from the Sandhills and Pinehurst region out for hospitality needs, and also to see if there was possibility for us to join them at the Sandhills Farmers Market there in the village of Pinehurst. And we have been there for 2 summers now. This is our 2nd summer. And very much appreciate being recruited and welcomed into that community, Miss Carla. And Miss Carla, I know she's going to introduce herself, but she manages that market. She and her husband put that market together and are developing community there, and they do really good work. She also manages Webb Farm, and they breed, train, and sell some golden retrievers and so much more, but she can tell you more about herself better than I can. So go ahead, Miss Carla, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a North Carolina transplant. I don't know how many of you are North Carolina natives or not, but it seems like in the world of Pinehurst, everybody comes from someplace else. And so my husband and I hail from Vail, Colorado. And everybody always asks me what brought us from Vail, Colorado to Pinehurst, North Carolina. And Tim loves to say he lost a bet. And the truth is that we had a technology company in the ski industry in the .com heyday and sold that company. And after we sold that company, had a good friend that purchased a company in Pinehurst in the golf industry and came to Pinehurst to do a very similar thing for them. And as that company got to the point where it needed to be funded more or sold, we were lucky enough to be able to sell it, and took a look at Pinehurst and decided that it was the small town that Vail used to be about 25 years ago, before it became a very big resort area, and really was something that brought Tim back to his New England roots. So we picked up from Vail and our house in Golden down in the city and came to Pinehurst. And I won't say that we've never looked back, but I can say that I still have my 303 area code. At least it keeps me tethered to Colorado on a regular basis, and we have family there. But it is kind of our adopted location, and we truly enjoy North Carolina and what it has to offer. So my history and background really is Colorado driven. I went to college in Fort Collins. I worked for Coors right out of college, one of only 25 women at the time. That tells you how old I am. So it became sports marketing in my blood, and worked for the Olympics also for years. I was the U.S. representative to the Olympic Academy in Greece, voting on what kind of sports we would add in the future, and many of those have come to fruition in the last several Olympic Games, so I'm really happy about some of that information. And I've hailed from small town, big resort, but mostly farmer roots, which is a very interesting piece these days. I find that some kids think that everything is grown at the grocery store and don't necessarily understand exactly where your food comes from. So having a farmer root, my grandparents and great-grandparents and aunts and uncles were all farmers. I had to hoe the bean rows, slog the hogs, push the cattle out of our teepee tents when we were kids, and do all that in Nebraska, where many of our Midwestern farmers grew up. So farming is really in my blood, and I never really gave it another thought. So that's what brought us to North Carolina, and what brought us really to the farmers market was our passion for the farmer in general.
Yeah, that's great, Ms. Carla, and that's a great segue. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Sand Hills Farmers Market and the role, and I always enjoy hearing Mr. Tim. Every time he interacts with the customer, he tells them what makes the Sand Hills Farmers Market different, right? So what does make the Sand Hills Farmers Market different? What are some of the things that y'all have incorporated and tried to pull together to form that community that's farmer-centric?
Well, so community is probably the key word, Ashton, for us and for all of you. It's more than just a market where you buy food. It's where you meet your friends, where you meet your neighbors, where you bring your kids, where you bring your dogs. It really has become for us a community gathering spot, which really the local farm and your local grocery, years ago was the same way. You knew Mabel, who was the checkout gal. She knew who you were. She knew what produce you needed, and when corn came in, that she was going to hold stuff aside for you. Well, that happens at a farmer's market today on a regular basis, so it really is a community location. We strive, as Ashton knows, to really support not just the local farmer, but a lot of new and young and upcoming farmers. We have, interestingly enough, a number of very young couples in their 20s and 30s who have chosen to be family farmers. And I mean family, like generational farmers. They've brought their parents into the fold. We have a Ithaca Acres Creamery, which is near our location down by the horse park down in Rayford. Has a young woman who wanted to raise goats and make goat's milk and goat cheese, and so she's done that, and her mother is the person that does all the lotions and all the creams. Her father runs all the animal husbandry, and so they've all moved together to the farm to do that. And it was an interesting concept that we find happens on a pretty regular basis. It needs that multi-generational piece to make that happen. Cox Brothers Farm is the same way. The parents of Ryan and Brian Cox are part of the farm, come to the farmers market, work the farm with their sons and their sons' wives and kids, and it's become a multi-generational piece. So we encourage the young farmers to do that, to get their first start.
That's great. And the first time that I met Ms. Carla and Mr. Tim, and they were introducing themselves to us, it was very casual and informal, and I thought they were nice enough people. But the second time we met them, we were getting serious, right? Like, we're all business people, we're all farmer and we're all community minded, but we're also here to do something. We're not here to just talk about it. And they brought us a piece of paper with their bio on it. And I was reading that bio as we were having lunch, and just like, wow, the careers that these two have had. She very humbly highlighted that she worked for Coors Brewing. The story she told me is that she took Coors Brewing from a state company to the national known brand.
I happened to work for them at the time that you might remember, if you're old enough, that Coors used to be only sold, west of the Mississippi. It was not a brand that was sold legally. It was bootlegged on the east coast of the Mississippi, and so I was part of the crew and the team that was able to take that brewery nationwide. So it made for some fun and very interesting opportunities as you turn distributors who used to make a living bootlegging across state lines that nobody knew about, of course, into real legitimate, beer distributors as they went on to the East Coast.
And then also just being kind of starstruck at her work with the Olympics. That's a huge brand. And then Mr. Tim's involvement. I don't understand all of the words, but the G10 golf scoring system and all. Like, I was just overly amazed at the resume that these two people have. And yet they are managing the Sand Hills Farmers Market, which is more than just a show up on Saturday, right? It's Saturday and Wednesdays, but it's also like wholesale and resale. There's a lot more layers to that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ms. Carla, but sometimes when I'm telling your story to other people, I say that this is almost like your community service for fun project. And if that's not true, correct me here publicly, but like you and your husband have all of these skills that you've honed over your lifetime, and you're pouring them into this community that needs it. And I know they appreciate it. We appreciate it. I hear everyone sing your praises, but what's your motivation for that? Or if I've mislabeled y'all's this season of your life, then correct me.
No, you're absolutely right. And what Ashton said at the very beginning is, ask a farmer what you can do for a farmer. And so truly how it began is there were 3 farmers that couldn't get into the other farmers market. Who knew that farmers markets were political? Never had an idea, but that's really how it works. Seems like it's penetrates everything that we do these days. And so the other farmers markets philosophy was probably a good one for the farmer, that they would take one producer in each category. And so if they had a producer of corn or lettuce or vegetables or peaches or blueberries, they would take one farmer. Well, when you look at what sustains a community and what makes agriculture work, you have to have more than one farmer. And interestingly enough, if you have the same farmer, strawberries are a perfect example. So in North Carolina, do you know that North Carolina is the 4th largest strawberry producer in the country? North Carolina. So we produce more strawberries. 90% of those strawberries are actually eaten and consumed within the borders of North Carolina, which creates a really interesting opportunity. Driscoll strawberries, which you see all the time in the grocery store, California bound, nothing wrong with Driscoll, good berry, all year long, big, huge producer. Same exact variety of berries all the time, because that berry, if you think about it, has to have the density, has to have tightness, has to be able to be shipped and not bruised and stay from California all the way across the U.S. until it comes to your grocery store. Berries in North Carolina, we grow 9 different varieties of berries in the Moore County, Montgomery County area, 9 varieties. Most of them you've probably never heard of. Everything from caramosis to sweet charlies to June berries to Camino Reals, just a whole host of different berries that come in and out of season throughout the strawberry season. None of them have to be shipped, so they are sweet, clear through. You bite that berry, and instead of being white on the inside, which you see in a Driscoll berry on a regular basis because of the variety of the berry, that berry is red all the way through. But I can tell you that you choose that berry, and if you choose it from a different farmer, same berry, different flavor, different experience, because of the way the farmer has fertilized, grown, picked, packed, culled, and brought to market. it can be a completely different product. So the combination of having multiple farmers sell multiple things is incredible for the consumer. The opportunity is just really wonderful. Same with Juneberry's lettuce. All the wonderful lettuces and things that happen at Juneberry that are hydroponic. You have hydroponic pieces. Then you've got some farmers, Cox Brothers, who I mentioned earlier, they grow all their lettuce in the ground under shade covers. Not quite a very different product, different flavor, different season, different opportunity, but lettuce that we would think of nonetheless. So it takes an entire group of different farmers. So we have now, I think Tim said, last count, 35 farmers that come in and out of our marketplace on a regular basis. It represents almost 5,000 acres of production. And most of the farms that produce in our area have not been farming vegetables for more than 12 or 15 years. They've all been tobacco farmers that have taken their tobacco money and created produce, which is an incredible thing, or brand new farmers who have never produced or farmed before.
Just a housekeeping. Are y'all all able to hear Miss Carla? Should I turn her mic up? We're good? Okay. Turn it up a little bit? Okay. I was sort of afraid of that, Miss Carla. So y'all bear with me and give us a test, Miss Carla.
Is that better? Okay.
All right. That's a great story, Miss Carla, and I held on to maybe 3 pieces there, and I'm going to try to hit them. So the question that I asked is, what drew you here? And you said farmers were asking, and you had a problem where farmers were being excluded from markets because they already had a person that had that there. And I can tell y'all, farmers markets are highly political, if y'all aren't aware. It's a toxic environment most of the time. And some are worse than others, but there are farmers markets with wait lists that are 3 years long. I was talking about the Raleigh State Farmers Market today with Miss Eleanor, our intern. I'm missing her. That there are some farmers there at the Raleigh State Farmers Market. You have to be present every single day or they'll give your spot to someone else, and they're open 364 days a year. So for 5 generations, someone's been sitting in the same spot so that they don't lose their spot, because if they do lose it, they'll wait 3 years to get it back. So it is highly political. And at Sandhills Farmers Market, I was looking today, I know there were at least 2 people that were promoting blueberries and blueberries alone. And you go to markets where you can only see blueberries one time because they're trying to diversify their product offering and sort of monopolize it, in my opinion. But the diversity, we talk a lot about diversity in the regenerative movement. We talk a lot about it from biodiversity and resilience. What a quote that Mr. Daniel has bestowed to me that I adopted is resilience is diversity in motion. That's what it is. And so one of the things, Miss Carla, when me and Mr. Bob and Mr. Rob came to the village for the first time for coffee with y'all, you told us the same story, but you went one layer deeper about those strawberries. Is however many varieties you can find in North Carolina and maybe even at your farmer's market, let's just say all 3 or 4 or 5 of your farmers at the Sandhills market that had the same cultivar of berry, there's still going to be diversity because of the way that each farmer handles and manages that berry. And when you think about that, it's pretty awesome to think that you're going to get variety A of strawberry from farmer B, C, and D, and each of them can have a different flavor profile. It just sort of like blows my mind. Versus when you get to some of these vertically integrated organizations, and I don't mean this to pick on Driscoll, that's just the brand that is most commonly available here, is they have rules and protocols because it is important to them that every guest experience is similar. So if I go to Food Line in Norwood and buy a Driscoll strawberry, it better taste the same as the one in Raleigh, in Sacramento, in Florida. Like they all have to be the same. And how boring is that? So that's just exciting to me to think about diversity, resilience as diversity in motion. And I hope that's true even at the political level of the farmers market, that I'm imagining it happens at Juneberry, but if you only have one strawberry provider and the yerba mate person calls out sick, then there's no strawberries at farmers market that day. But
It's true.
Please speak some more.
It's true. Well, and one of the key things too is that what we just talked about with the variety, the only way you're going to know that is to ask your farmer. And so the interesting thing, have you ever tried to ask the produce guy at the grocery store anything about the variety of produce that he has? So if you asked him what variety those green beans were, I guarantee what he'll say is they're green beans. So they won't tell you that they might be Blue Lake green beans, or they might be Short Lake green beans, or they might be stringless green beans or string beans. So there are all different varieties as you come forward. In fact, we had a Clayfish farm today had 6 different variety of green beans today. 6 different variety. Who knew? And the purple green beans are probably one of the sweetest. So if you haven't had purple green beans, Japanese green beans, he had yellow green beans that are called golden beans that are spicy green beans already. So you could get all sorts of different things and different pieces from each of your different farmers. And the farmers love to talk about their produce because that's what they focus on. You might find that the farmer's not a great sales guy, but if you ask him about their produce, better have a little bit of time. Just like if you ask me about your strawberries, better have a little bit of time, because they'll want to tell you everything that they know about why they chose that piece of produce, what it tastes like, how they grew it, and what you can expect when you get it home.
Oh, that's great. And Ms. Carla has reminded me sort of what Mr. Daniel talked about last week, and I see a contradiction here, and I'd like to clarify that. Daniel told us to stop asking questions of our farmers, but he conditioned that to say, stop asking your farmer if they're organic. Stop asking your farmer if they're all natural. Stop asking your farmer if they're regenerative. These are labels that mean less and less the more that we say those words. They have less and less value. But I do think it's important for us to know our farmers and sort of segue in our conversation just a little bit here. Any of you folks familiar with Mr. Joel Salatin? Like hand raised, probably one of the most famous farmers in America, if not the world. Are you familiar with Joel Salatin? He's up in Virginia. I think it's Staunton, Virginia, Polyface Farms. He's very adamant about human scale biomimicry farming. And so what that means is, how can I farm in ways that mimic nature at a scale that human beings can do it? Now, not that he believes in tractors. I'm just saying, like, a man on a tractor is still human scale, but it's not industrialized, commercialized, commoditized agriculture. And I'm borrowing this sermon from Mr. Joel. If you are familiar with him, you already know this. If you're not, you either love him or hate him. He's very preachy. So he uses big words. He's a journalist. He gets in rants and soapboxes. So you either love the guy or you hate him, but I intend to like him just fine. So what he says is, as Americans, as consumers, as citizens, we spend a lot of time vetting all kinds of services that we think are important to us, right? And maybe all of these don't register for you, but like a plumber or a mechanic or a doctor or dentist or a lawyer, you either ask a friend, a family member, a coworker, Angie's List, Facebook, like Google reviews, like there's a star for everything. We vet people to a T for any service that we want. And yet the things that we're putting into our body, we seem to care nothing about. Like, do you know the person that grew this food that you're putting into your body that is becoming you? Maybe some of the most important things that we do every day is put food into our bodies. And I would argue that probably most of us, me included, can't say where all of our food comes from on a daily basis. And so one of the sub-pillars of our conversation this week was about getting to know your farmer. And it is something that is important to me. I do think that it's important to be curious enough to ask questions, but it is painfully demoralizing for farmers to sort of be interrogated about every nitpicking detail of how they did this or how they did that, that was the intent of Mr. Daniel saying, stop asking people questions about how they do things. But really, we do need to ask questions. We do need to know our farmers. And one of the two pillars that are important to me, buying local is very important. But also, I've come to start saying, buy food from people that you respect. I mean, local is important, but being able to know someone and who they are and how they make decisions and how they live their life is important too. Even if sometimes you have to drive a little farther, that's okay.
So it's a really good segue. One of the things that when Ashton and I first started talking about coming out here and having the conversation about local food, is he asked me what really made me passionate about following local food. And interestingly enough, I was in sports marketing for years, and we had a big conference down in Florida, and the keynote speaker was from the CDC. And so, of course, you're in sports marketing, so the CDC is talking to you about what else? But exercise and health. And so we've all heard the philosophy that, exercise is medicine. So he gets up and he talks about the fact that we have this issue in the United States where in the 1960s and 1970s, 80% of school children who lived within 2 miles of their school walked to school. When it became the 1990s, 80% of children who lived within 2 miles of school got a ride to school. And so just in that time frame, we made this huge shift on something so simple. And so he sat down at the table for lunch with me, and I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to ask him, okay, if you could just tell me one thing, just one thing that I should know, based on what you're doing at the CDC, what would it be? And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be exercise, it's going to be, get out, move more, make those things happen. He looked at me square in the face and he said, know where your food comes from. And I thought, oh my gosh, that was like a jolt to the heart. Know where your food comes from. I had just come back from Germany, and it had been part of mad cow disease. I had been on a small farm. I got on a plane in Munich, and we had to walk through a vat of solution so that we weren't bringing any of that home on the plane to the United States. Know where your food comes from. It was a really interesting segue. All the things you hear about lettuce recall, peanut recall, all the salmonella, all the disease pieces, that's knowing where your food comes from. So for me, know your farmer, know your food becomes a real heartfelt piece. And when you go to a farmer's market, any farmer's market, get to know who that farmer is. If it's a real farmer's market, the person that stands behind the counter works at the farm, lives on the farm, or is the farmer. So talk to your farmer. Get to know who he is, what he thinks, what he believes. He'll talk to you. If he's like Gary Priest, who is probably one of our favorite farmers, he'll talk to you about asparagus till he was blue in the face. He would give you a pound of asparagus to have you try because he believed so much in his product and that it was so different than what you could get at the grocery store. And most of the farmers I find are that passionate. So share that passion with them. So the one word I can say to you, or the one phrase I can give you, is know your farmer, know your food, and feel good about knowing your farmer and knowing where your food comes from.
I want Ms. Carla to go a little bit deeper into food as medicine, but you touched on something that I haven't even thought about until just now. I had the pleasure of giving a small tour to a group of people, and I get on a soapbox about food safety. Ms. Carla talked about lettuce recalls and peanut recalls and all of these recalls, and we all freak out about those. And those are also a plight to local farmers. And I just wanted to take a moment to draw attention to that. Food safety is real. My one-liner that I wish everyone could hear is that no one ever should, and yet every year people do die from eating fresh produce. predominantly because there's no kill step. A lot of these things we're not cooking. And the other part is that everyone assumes someone else is washing it. So my PSA for the day is wash your produce, take care of yourselves. And the other thing is, I went to NC State. I didn't do a good job of introducing myself, but I went to NC State. I studied horticulture science there. Food safety was a big pillar of what we do. Also, NC State is the hub for most all of our county extension agents in partnership with NCA&T, of course. And I can't tell y'all just the laundry list of times that homeowners will call in and say, they had a spinach recall. Should I throw the spinach away that I grew in my backyard? They had a spinach recall. Should I throw away the spinach that I bought at farmer's market? And the reality is that it is, you know, the U.S., Joel Salatin calls it the U.S. right? The U.S. USDA. Their job is to protect the general population at large. And so when you think about certain farms like Salinas Valley, California, being the salad basket of the U.S., and so I'm making this number up. I'm not even trying. I didn't prepare for this. But just say 70% of the U.S. salad comes out of this valley, and 2 of those farms have an issue. That affects a lot of people. So they put something on the news and tell everyone not to eat lettuce. That doesn't mean that all lettuce is contaminated. That means that 40% of lettuce is contaminated. But the systemic spread of that is huge. And so just my PSA is like, you can get sick from produce at the farmer's market. I'm not telling you that it's safe. What I'm telling you is if you hear something on the news, don't assume that all products of that commodity type are also contaminated. And that's also another element of know your farmer, know where your food comes from, is to be able to call your farmer instead of your extension agent and to have a pleasant conversation instead of them bringing their perfectly fine, beautifully grown spinach to market and everyone snubs their nose up at it. So that's just a little extra tidbit from me on my soapbox.
And a good soapbox to be on. So, and every farmer will tell you, we GAP certify many of the farmers at our farmers market. It's called Good Agriculture Practices. It's a huge book that the farmer has to write himself about what his philosophy is, what he does with his produce, how he manages every single field, because each field is marked. Every time he fertilizes that field, it's marked. Every time he harvests out of that field, it's marked. They really go through a lot of practices to make that happen. And then every time it's picked and packed and shipped and stored and brought to market or brought back from market or sold to another farm stand. And so there's a lot of protocols and pieces from it. But it is good to know what he does for good agriculture practices to help get it good to your table so that you can get it to your sink and you'll know how to store it. And if you want to know how to keep something, ask your farmer. Asparagus, interestingly enough, you may all know this, you store asparagus like you store a flour. Cut the bottoms off, put it in water, put it in the refrigerator. Some produce stores great in the refrigerator, so ask your farmer. They're happy to tell you. I'm happy to tell you never store a tomato under 60 degrees because it will lose all its flavor for you. Never put a peach in the refrigerator unless you are already done ripening it because it won't ripen after it goes under 40 degrees. Store it on your counter. Peach gives off an ethylene gas. Put it in a brown bag and it will ripen faster for you. Any number of pieces, the farmer will be happy to tell you because he wants you to love your produce. Really wants you to love your produce.
Yeah. So I'm dying selfishly for Ms. Carla to dive in a little bit deeper to food as medicine. You're working on a project with a physician, and I'd just like to give you the opportunity to tell them the story you told me on the phone. I think it's worth hearing.
So we looked at exercise as medicine, right? The CDC says you should know your farmer, know where your food comes from. And then you look at all the issues and things that happen today in the world, and you have to know that food becomes medicine, whether it's to help you with diabetes, to help you lose weight, to help you maintain weight, to have fiber. I mean, everybody tells you, geez, I see more Metamucil commercials than I could possibly shake a stick at, but green beans are a great source of fiber. They're really great in the marketplace. We already discussed you have 9 varieties of green beans. You could have green beans every single day for 2 weeks and have all the fiber you possibly need and never eat the same type of green bean and never drink Metamucil. So wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to be able to help yourself do those things simply by the type of food that you eat and knowing that that food comes from the farmer's market and that the farmer's ready to do that. So food does become medicine. We're doing a grant with a doctor at First Health that talks about that. Interestingly enough, a lot of our farmers would like to provide their excess produce to the food banks. It's a real challenge because a lot of the families that come to the food bank will gravitate towards the blue box of macaroni and cheese rather than the broccoli. It's because it's fast, it's easy, it's what you know, it's very inexpensive in the grocery store when you buy it. And so it's what you grew up with. And so it's really difficult to get the fresh produce down to the right people. So it is the medicine that you want. If the mother knew that the broccoli would be so much more beneficial, you know she'd choose it every single time because it would be what she would want for her family. But because people don't think about food as medicine and think about how everything you put in your body affects your body, they don't even know what the choice is or how to make that choice. But we can make that choice. And so it's a choice that I challenge you to do. I don't know if any of you have heard of there's a theoretically weight loss program, Whole 30 food program that talks about only eat whole foods, 30 days, Whole 30. And it talks about the food, the glycemic index, and how to choose foods that really help and support your body. It's a really interesting program. I think it's something that if you did it for 30 days, just 30 days, it's not a big deal, but it would give you a whole different perspective of how fresh food really affects your body. And it's a really interesting perspective as well, something simple to do. Now, giving up the wine and the beer and the alcohol might be a little tough, but everything else is darn good.
So you told me, Miss Carla, that you had written a grant for a project. Mm-hmm. Would you care to speak about that at all?
So it's still an ongoing piece. It's not completed yet. So, but we are, for the farmers market, doing the same thing. Our goal and objective is to work with the physicians for the Pinehurst Pediatrics and some of the other pieces where diabetes is a perfect example. If we were able to provide pamphlets and information to people about how food is medicine rather than just exercise. I mean, you hear it all the time about if you're a diabetic, you need to walk more, lose some weight, but nobody talks about how you're eating food from the farmer's market and how that can just change your entire life and change the pieces that you're doing. So we're working with them just to get the information out there so that it becomes an easier thing for people to do and understand. Because knowledge is really the value.
Yeah, that's great. So, I used to, my family and I just built a house a year ago, so we've been incredibly busy since before that started. But prior to that, I had a little more discretionary time. I spent a lot of time on what I call YouTube University. I don't know if any of y'all applied to that school or got in. But I'm, I always watch something that fills my passion bucket, and most of that was farmers and homesteaders and how to build or fix whatever I had broken that week. But so much of what you see on YouTube of farmers and homesteaders are typically one of two major umbrella groups. Group one is went to school because that's what I was supposed to do, got a good paying job in the city because that's what I was supposed to do, realized that I was miserable, sold everything, bought a small piece of land, and now I'm financially free to F up a bunch and figure out how to do it myself, right? So that's group one. And then group two is I have a chronic illness, I refuse to take the drugs that they tell me to take, and I have discovered through real life experience that I can heal myself through what I put in my body. I'm not going to get intimately detailed about those people and their situations. Justin Rhodes and his wife Rebecca, they have over 1 million YouTube followers. They're worth listening to. They're good people. They've been doing this for a long time. But both of them have chronic diseases that they're able to treat through holistic food growing and self-medication through that way. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of stories. I almost feel a little bad saying this because some of us know Mr. Daniel, but the gentleman that was here last week can only eat 23 ingredients or he will die. Like, the reason he started farming for himself was literally to not die. He can touch certain plants and like get chronically ill for long periods of time. And so it's not something to sort of turn your nose up at. There's some real power in it. And just my last maybe selfish comment that I would like to make here is, just like food can be medicine for people, the way in which we grow that food can also be prescriptive and healing for the land. And you know, the word regenerative agriculture gets tossed around a lot. I say it's been adulterated. It carries very little meaning. But if you really get pure with that word and the methods and what it means for the land, it's pretty powerful how land stewards can go out onto a property in place and time and read that land and understand what it needs to be more productive and more healthy in itself. And we do things like putting chickens on the land to kickstart fertility and spread litter and cover soil and do all of those things that they do. We put pigs on land to disturb it. We put cows and sheep on land to continuously restart that growth cycle for grass versus using a lawnmower. And we do all these things sort of like food is medicine for the human, that food can also be medicine for the land. And I think there's real power for that in that. And for me, that is what drew me to this movement. Obviously, I'm not, eating the most healthy that I should, but really just get excited about what we can do as humans to better ourselves and our place through farming and food.
I'll echo that, and I'll encourage you to know your farmer, know your food. Seek out the farmers markets. Think about them more as a community grocery store. Our farmers market, like you guys all know, is community. We invite every family, every child, every dog, every person to come and join us at the market. We've got musicians. It's just, it becomes the place that you want to choose your food. And all of a sudden, it changes your relationship with food. And I hope that it will change your relationship with your farmer and change what you think about when you see what's on your plate.
That's great. And I told Ms. Carla at the end I was going to ask her, what can we all do? Like, whether we're consumers or farmers or just advocates, what can we do to be a part of the solution instead of the problem? And that very well may have been your answer. If you care to elaborate, go ahead.
So not only the farmers market, but I implore you to find the chefs that are using farm-to-table practices. They will tell you, because they will tell you what farms they're getting their produce from, what farms they're getting and sourcing all of their beef and chicken and pork and fish. We have a fishmonger that drives from Morehead City. He is the captain of the boat. He comes 3 hours up on Saturdays to bring fresh fish to the market. Never frozen, anything that was caught within 24 to 48 hours. And so it's that passion that you can support. You can support it at your restaurant, you can support it at your farmer's market, you can support it through your neighbors, makes really good housekeeping gifts, makes a really nice thing for everybody to enjoy what's out there. And I'll tell you what, if you want to really know what a good tomato tastes like, buy one at the grocery store, buy one at the farmer's market. Do it for everything. You will be amazed when you think about how long it takes a product to go from farm to the grocery store versus the fact that the farmer's market picks it the morning you get it. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing.
And because I asked both Daniel and Carla that, I thought to myself, what would I say if I was put on the spot? What can we all do? I'm a big fan of Wendell Berry. I don't know anybody else know Wendell Berry. He's a pretty infamous farmer and poet and just a great man. But he has a quote that says, in order to be a good consumer, one must produce. And I'd like to break that down just a little bit. It's kind of like, I'm hoping that most of us have either had one or said this to a child that, everyone should have a customer service job, right? You want to learn how to be a good humor, work customer service somewhere. Well, that's what Wendell Berry's talking about here. In order to be a good consumer, you must produce. I would be willing to bet that all of us, me included, have went to your favorite box store or even farmer's market stand and rifled through the display looking for that specimen fruit or vegetable or whatever it is that you're looking for. It needs to be perfect. I'm paying full price for it. I got to impress people. Whatever your reason is, it's almost innate nature to do that. But I'm also assuming in this demographic that some of us are home gardeners. So you grow that tomato that you went through the grocery store and picked through to find the perfect one. You grow it in your backyard and it has a hole in the middle of it and it's black on one side and you dropped it on the way to the house so now it's busted. You hold that thing up like a trophy and you eat it because you grew it, right? And so why can't we have that same attitude everywhere? There is so much food waste in this country, in this community, in our backyards, everywhere that I think we all could stand to be better consumers. And honestly, like I'm being a little pointed here, but if you're not willing to be a better consumer, then the next best thing is grow some of your own food. Like my wife and I challenged ourselves to grow 5% of our food. And that was before we started building a house. I won't tell you what we're doing now. But we got so addicted to it, I think we ended up growing about 25% of our food for 9 months. So you can do it.
Or you can come to the farmer's market and get it from the farmer. That's right.
That's right.
And I will echo that. It's interesting. So we have a wonderful farmer that produces what you would normally call a greenhouse tomato, because he starts those tomatoes in January. He does have a modified greenhouse. So when the weather is warm enough, he rolls the sides up, so it's natural pollination. He plants those in dirt, and he harvests them now. We've had tomatoes in the marketplace for almost 6 weeks. They are incredible. They are the most beautiful tomatoes. But right now it's a little warm, so they're getting what I call sun-kissed. So the top of the tomato has got a little bit of yellow on it. It might not be quite as ripe as the rest of the tomato. And so you see tomatoes for farmer's market flipped upside down all the time. We do that because the tomato rolls around, so you flip him upside down. People have a tendency to want to look at the other side of that tomato. No problem. But if he's not perfect, people will put it down or say, I want a different one. Okay, so I challenge you. What are you going to do with the top of that tomato? I guarantee you're going to cut it off. You're going to cut it off. So what difference does it make if it's sun-kissed, because the tomato underneath is the value for you? And so you leave the farmer with all the sun-kissed tomatoes that he can't sell because the consumer won't buy them. So we call them misfit or ugly produce. But the truth of the matter is it's no different than everything else that's there. And he doesn't know how to tell you that it's going to taste exactly the same because he doesn't want to offend you when you're picking his prettiest produce. But I, of course, as I sell for some of my farmers that don't have an opportunity to get to the market, will be the first one to tell you, what are you going to do with the top of that tomato? I think you're going to probably cut it off. So help the farmer sell his ugly produce as well, and know that it will taste just as good.
That's great. So we're out of time, folks. I know that Miss Carla agreed to hang back and answer some questions. Last time I accidentally concluded the show with this other quote from Wendell Berry, and I think I'm just going to make this be the conclusion for the rest of these, is that Wendell Berry tells us that every day we vote with our dollar. We vote with our dollars. So if we choose to go to Walmart and buy the cheapest, most available food product that we have, we voted for Walmart to go out and procure more of that cheap food. If we go to the farmer's market or our local grocery store or our local restaurant where the chef is providing farm-to-table stuff, guess what? They're going to go out and procure or grow that local stuff and keep that party going. And so last week I was doing really quick, I didn't break it down like that, but what I also said is that all of y'all are voting with your butts. So if y'all keep coming early and sitting down and listening to us, we'll keep talking about stuff. I'm very excited for this session. I'm very honored that you all came and listened, and I hope to see y'all back. And let's give a warm welcome, thank you to Miss Carla.
All right.